Okay, so there has been a request for me to do the Red Panda by Choly Knight, and here is what you'll be producing. So if you decide this is a project that you want to make, you need to go to the Choly Knight website, which is just cholyknight.com, click on free patterns and plushes, and scroll to the Red Panda. From there, you need to scroll down and download both the embroidery files and the pattern itself. When you're extracting the embroidery files, be very aware that because this does both the Racoon and the Red Panda, there are two very distinct faces. Both work with applique, it's just they put them in different places, giving a completely different look. Depending whether you're doing applique or whether you're using an embroidery machine depends on which pages you print out. If you skip ahead to page 30 and print pages 30, 31 and 32, then you've got your main pattern. You will also need page 33 if it is that you are doing applique rather than embroidery. Once you've got your pattern printed off and it's in paper form, the first thing I tend to do is I cover mine in sticky back plastic. It's the stuff that you use to cover school books, that sort of thing. I find that it means that my pattern's going to last that bit longer and I can use it for more than just one use. If it's a trial, by all means, you can actually skip this step, you don't need to do this step. It's just something I do. If you've not watched my videos before, you will see that I'm actually using a bread scraper in order to alleviate any bubbles. I'm actually going to speed this up because, yep, you really don't want to watch me in real time covering 3 pieces of paper in sticky back plastic. Once you have covered your pattern in sticky back plastic, or not, the next step is to cut out your paper pattern. Again, I'm going to speed this up because you don't really need to see somebody cutting out a pattern in real time. I was going to skip the embroidery machine phase, but due to the fact that this pattern has so much applique on it, I've decided to show you the various steps. Once your embroidery machine has got to the point where the alternate fabric needs to be added, you need to add the fabric slightly bigger than it needs to be, place it on top and let the machine do almost like a stay stitch. Your machine is going to do a stitch that shows you where this fabric needs to go. Once your machine has secured the second fabric onto the first fabric, we're going to cut around it. You need to cut as close as you can to the stitches without cutting through the stitches or cutting into the applique part of the fabric. I'm not great at this, but even when you're not great, you can still achieve a really good result. Now you've removed all the excess fabric, your fabric's going to go back into the machine and it's going to stitch round, hopefully covering any bits that you weren't able to cut off. But this is where it hides where you've not done perfectly, and if not, you might get a little bit sticking out. When it's a creature like this, it could be a tuft of fur, so don't worry if you're not perfect. Once you've done the applique part of the face, the rest of the face embroiders as normal, just change the colours to the colours you require for the eyes and iris and all the other bits. Don't forget, you don't have to follow the colour scheme that's laid out by Choly Knight. You can get very different results using very different threads. If you've run out of black, try blue. See what you can actually achieve with the colours you have in. This pattern also uses a technique called in the hoop. That basically means that the ears are stitched completely in the hoop and you are going to cut round them, turn them inside out, and they're going to be ready to go. So once you've done the applique of the middle ear, you're going to put the back of the fabric, or the back part of the fabric, wrong side up, down onto the top of the ear, sew, let the machine sew around it, you're not sewing around it. At which point you will have a completed ear. Obviously you're going to be doing this once for the left and once for the right. Now the embroidery is done, I'm going to divide my pattern pieces by colour. There are actually 4 different colours in this, 2 of which have been used already in the applique, so I need to keep the consistency and use the 3 colours I've already got, and I'm adding another colour for the back paws. Once you've decided what colours you're going to use and what pattern pieces are going to go where, now I do tend to have a bit of a play around, especially with a pattern like this where some of the bits are a little bit on the smaller side, so you might be able to cut them out of pieces that you may have otherwise just been throwing away, which is great because I don't like to waste the fabric. So once you've decided how you're going to cut things out, get cutting. Do double check how many pattern pieces you need to cut of each pattern piece. Unlike Choly Knight's other patterns, this doesn't have a front head and a back head. It is all the same pattern piece, so for the head you are cutting out 4 times. And again with the little back paws, you actually need 4 of those, not 2, as you are going to be stuffing them and then sewing them on afterwards. I have cut rather a large chunk of the video out because I realised I was cutting a lot of the pattern off camera, but I will give you a little hint, is once you've actually cut out one piece and there's multiples of that piece, you can use the fabric as your pattern template. It just makes it easier to cut out, or I find it does anyway. This is where you get to see your in the hoop embroidery file actually in action. Like I said, you cut round it like you would any other pattern piece, then it's literally a case of flip and go, because it's already sewn the two pieces of fabric together, so your ears are good to go. As always, the piece that you really want to take caution with is anything that's already got embroidery on the fabric. You want to make sure that your pattern pieces line up, otherwise you could end up with, well, you could end up with something that does not look like what you wanted it to. So just be careful when you've got an embroidery already on the fabric to line up those pattern pieces as carefully as possible. Once you're over at your sewing machine, the very first thing you need to do is sew your darts into your head. Once you've got your darts in place, you sew the two sides of the front of the face together, followed by adding the ears, which this can be, you can play around with this having a little bit of fun, and it actually can create a completely different character if you place the ears in different positions. Moving on to the belly piece, we're going to start with the darts on here, and from there we are going to add the inner legs to the belly. The nice thing about this is both curves go in the same direction. Just as we did with the front of the head, on the back of the head we need to add the darts in. Next we're going to sew the face to the body, creating the front of the neck. As we sew up the back of the head, it's important to remember we need to leave a gap in about the middle of the back of the head where we're going to actually be able to turn the panda from when it's complete. Just as we sewed the inner leg to the stomach, we now need to sew the outer leg to the back. As this is curved in opposite directions, it can be a little bit fiddly. Next we sew the body darts for the back, followed by sewing the back up together. As we did with the front, we are now going to sew the back to the back of the head, creating the neck at the back. We finish creating the main body by sewing the front to the back. Be careful to make sure that you do catch all the fabric in those fiddly little places, and be cautious when you are sewing in around the tufts around the cheeks, because obviously you want these to be able to stick out, you want them to be defined. This next one can be a little bit fiddly as you are sewing the small back paws. Next we're sewing the darts on the nose and then sewing the main body of the nose to the nose base. This will be sewn onto the head later. As our front paws have different colours to our front arms, we need to sew the little paws onto the front, making sure that we do get the alignment correct. Once we have both paws attached, it's time to sew all the way around the arms. Yes, you are completely enclosing the arms. This may seem counterintuitive, but it will make sense later. Our last piece of machine sewing is to sew up the tail. The tail has numbers on the pattern, so make sure that you get your tail pieces in the right order. You first are sewing each one along, so you will end up with a striped but curved piece of fabric. Once you have done that, we're folding it over and we are sewing it together. You will see that there is a slight curve to this. This allows for the curve when it's actually stuffed and added when we're hand sewing it on a little bit later. Once all the machine sewing is done, it's time to do some hand sewing. First, you need to make a cut in the base of the nose in order to turn it inside out, and do the same on both of the bottom paws as well. Then you can turn the tail the right way around and the body through the back of the head with the gap that was left when we sewed up the back of the head. When it comes to your front paws, you're going to make an incision in one side of it. Now, what you do need to be careful of is to make sure that your two paws are facing in opposite directions, as there is a slight curve, and you don't want him to look like her to look like she has got bandy legs. From here you can start to stuff the various pieces. I always start with the main body since everything's being sewn onto it. It's a good place to start and have that done first. Once you have everything stuffed, it is time to close up the head with a simple ladder stitch. Just make sure you secure your thread at the beginning and the end. You don't want this coming undone later. After which I've secured the nose, you can play around with this and you can actually give your Racoon Red Panda a completely different personality depending on where it is you actually put the nose. Not just the placement, but the angle at which it sits. If you're unsure, try playing around with some safety pins first, or dressmaker's pins, and just see how it is you want it to look. I do tend to go around things like the nose and the feet twice to make sure that they don't fall off. If you're doing this for a small child, I'd actually recommend going around a few more times just to ensure that that is not coming off when pulled. Once you've sewn everything to the front, so you've got your nose, your front paws and your back paws all sewn on, it's time to position the tail. Now, if your plush is a little bit front heavy, you can actually use this tail to weight it at the back and make sure that it sits up correctly. Once you've sewn that on, you are all ready to go and you have your Racoon / Red Panda. I would love to see your results. There is a link in the description showing you where you can actually share your results with me on Facebook. I will also be sharing the links for the pattern itself and a few other bits. Don't forget to like and subscribe.